Hey guys, thank you so much for watching today's story part 8. So I'm going to pick up where I left off last week, which was we had a CPS case opened against us. We went through all emotions and eventually all accusations were deemed unfounded and the story went on. Unfortunately, the accusations were actually true and the system failed at this point, but it is what it is. So, my daughter's dad, myself, and my daughter, we all moved out of town. We were trying to get away from everything. We were kind of trying to get a fresh start, and we moved out of the valley to a different town down south. And we got a place out there, and things just got increasingly worse. There was a lot of ugliness going on between my daughter's dad and I, and our drug use was also getting worse. And there was a lot of fighting and just a lot of stuff that it wasn't a good place for our baby at the time. She was 3 years old, I think. And so we decided to split. We decided to go our separate ways, and I moved out because I didn't really have a choice. I was not working. I think I was working part-time at this point, and I didn't have the money to support myself or Arabella. So I left, moved out, was kind of just living out of my car, and her dad and her stayed at the apartment, and I was going back and forth every day while he was working to hang out with her and be with her. And then at one point I had shown up there and they weren't there, and I couldn't get a hold of him. And so I got really worried and really stressed out, and I think this went on for at least a few days, and I didn't know what was going on. And at this point, both of us had started seeing other people, so I assumed he was probably with his new girlfriend as I was with my new boyfriend, but there was no communication, so I was very, very concerned. And so I ended up reaching out and asking my family for some help, which before this point would never have done. I had really, at this point, I was very angry and resentful and wanted nothing to do with any of them because of the CPS thing, even though looking back, I mean, I would have done the same thing had I been in their position. So I asked for their help, and her and her dad surfaced, and he ended up dropping Bella off with my aunt for the weekend. And during that time, we were trying to get a temporary guardianship order so that my aunt could keep her for a while, because like I said, I was in no position. I was bouncing around from place to place, and I didn't have money or a place of my own. I was in no position to take care of her, if I'm honest. I wasn't. Things were really hard at this point, and I was very focused on my drug use and the reckless life I was leading, and I did so much care for Arabella, but I was not in the position to parent her. And at this point now there was her dad. And so there was a little bit of drama surrounding the situation because her dad had been under the impression that she was just going to be staying there for the weekend. He didn't know that I was trying to sign over temporary guardianship to my aunt, and when he found this out, he was very upset and very angry. And I can't say I blame him at all. And he really was, and he's always been such a good dad. It's just that at this point, neither one of us were okay. Like we just weren't okay. Our lives weren't okay. Everything was falling apart and into shambles, and it was a really rough time for everybody, and everybody was very scared. And so he was resisting this whole guardianship agreement thing, and so my parents and my aunt didn't want him to be able to come and pick her up at this point. So my mom ended up calling me and wanted to bring me out to my aunt's so that in case there was any drama and the cops were called or anything like that, that I could be a custodial parent there, saying that I was relinquishing temporary guardianship to my aunt, and so that we could keep her there with my aunt for now. And so my poor mother, I told her, I was like, of course I want to help, and I want this to be the case, but at this point, I think I was dope sick, and I wasn't willing to go out there without any dope and be stuck out there and be sick. So I told her this, and so she was very focused on just what we needed to do to make sure Arabella was going to be safe and keep her with my aunt. And so she was like, whatever, I'm going to come get you. And she ended up having to give me money so I could go buy myself some dope so that I had enough stuff to last me for however long I was going to be there at my aunt's, which I think the plan was to only be there like maybe a day. And I didn't even end up needing to stay the whole day. But my mom had to go through this probably horrible moral battle inside of herself to be able to do that. But she was very obviously just using her best judgment in the situation and doing what she felt was necessary to keep my baby safe. And unfortunately, you know, it's rough a little bit looking back and realizing that that was my first thought. You know, and it was a situation where it was concerning the safety of my daughter, but my first thought was, well, I need dope to be able to do that. So it's rough to look back on those things, but that was the reality of the situation then. So, so my mom hooked me up. I got my stuff. I went out to my aunt's. I was completely just strung out. I was a mess. And luckily, everything ended up working out fine. There wasn't any drama, and she ended up being able to stay there with my aunt for now. This is where I'm going to leave off. This is kind of the point in the road where things start getting very sticky. Not too long after this point, some very tragic things happen. So keep watching, you guys. Thank you so much for following along with our story. We really appreciate it. I think both of us find it therapeutic in a way to share this with everybody, and we're hoping that our story can reach out to anybody and let everybody out there know that, like, it doesn't really matter, like, how far down you've gone down the rabbit hole. Like, you can come back out of it, and that's the purpose why we're doing this. Thank you guys so much. My mom's up next. Please listen to her point of view of this, and we'll see you guys later in the week.
Hi again. I'm Ann, Anna's mom. So we left off in this story last week where Anna and my pseudo son-in-law had been working a plan that we'd all agreed on with DSHS, Child Protective Services. And they weren't working it, they were using. And I was worried about that, but there wasn't much to be done at that point because CPS went ahead and closed their case, finding no problem. During that time, Anna and pseudo son-in-law and the baby all moved away from the town that we all lived in together, so they were not close to me, to their own condo or apartment in Renton for a little while. And during that time, I didn't see very much of them. Saw them a little bit, but not very much. And I think they moved there so they wouldn't be under my thumb. So I was always nervous about that and suspicious about what was happening, and actually really scared about what was happening. I did see them a couple of times, and I was there a couple of times at the apartment, but things didn't really seem to be going very well. And at some point while there, as Anna has just told you, she and pseudo son-in-law broke up, and Anna took off. She was really in bad shape. Didn't really know her, actually, in those days. She was running around back in town in North Bend some of the time where I lived, and I don't think she was up to anything very good. And it was really difficult to see her. In fact, it was difficult to see her. It was difficult to even be around her. She came to see me, I remember, at Christmas time, and she was so thin and pale. She was wasting away. She'd never been a thin person anyway, and she looked so unhealthy, and I thought, she can't keep using like this and keep this lifestyle up and stay alive too much longer. It's just too dangerous. So it was really bad. And there was almost like a darkness around her at that time. It feels funny to say it as her mom, but I didn't like being around her. She felt creepy to me. She didn't seem like herself. I didn't feel Anna in there. I knew Anna was in there, in that body somewhere, was my daughter, but it was like she was a shell of what used to be her, and she felt dangerous. I actually was a little bit afraid of what she was up to and what she was doing in her life, and I was afraid of those influences coming and harming me somehow. She just didn't seem like she was in a good place at all, and she didn't seem like her. And it was really hard to think and feel those things about my own daughter. I felt really guilty about it. But it was true. I mean, she'd come and she wouldn't look me in the eye, and she, you know, I knew she was lying and hiding things from me, and I got that. But there was more. There was more than that. It was like she'd gone into a place that was dark and almost evil. Not that she was evil, but like she was under the influence of something. And I'm not saying anything in particular about that, but it just felt, it was like the drug had taken over her, and I couldn't find her in there anymore, even though I knew she still existed. So it was a pretty dark time. And through that dark time, pseudo son-in-law had the baby, and he ended up moving from their apartment or condo, I'm sure, got kicked out for not paying, and back into his mom's place with his mom and his stepdad and the baby. And it didn't sound like things were going very well there either. And I saw less and less of the baby and had less and less contact, and that was really, really worrying me. And at one point, I was at work, and Anna called me, and she was really upset, and she had been trying to get a hold, I guess, of pseudo son-in-law and the baby for some time. They'd just disappeared and couldn't get a hold of them, and for several days. And that made me really nervous. I talked to pseudo son-in-law's mom, and she hadn't seen him for a couple of days. He had stated at that point that he was dropping the baby off at my sister's for the weekend, and he did. And my sister took her often for the weekend, or for whenever. I mean, she or I were willing to take the baby at any time, but she was in a much better place to be able to care for her regularly, because I was, you know, self-employed and by myself, and she was actually running a state licensed daycare out of her home. So that was really helpful, and had a beautiful family support around her. Anyway, he dropped the baby off there, and by then she was 3 and had taken off, and then we couldn't find him, and he was really, really high. We knew he was really strung out. He was saying some pretty crazy things that were scaring all of us, and he was selling, and we knew he'd had the baby in the car while out, you know, selling drugs in the middle of the night. We'd been told stories anyway, this sort of thing, and we were really disturbed about what was going on, and a lot of the other information we were getting. So we did not want him coming to pick up the baby, but we didn't have any legal grounds to stop him. And he said he was going to come and pick up the baby from my sister's and take her away, and none of us would ever see her again. And because he kept disappearing, we were concerned that that might be true. And we were really worried. When I say we, it was myself and Anna and my mom and my sister and my whole side of the family. I think his family, everybody was worried about what was going on, the whole family. So he said he was coming that afternoon, this particular day when Anna called me, to my sister's, which was about an hour and a half from my house, to come and pick her up, and that we wouldn't be seeing her again. So I talked with Anna and tried to figure out what we could do. I called the law enforcement out in the town where my sister lives and also where I lived, and basically there wasn't a lot we could do about it unless there was another parent present. So I said, Anna, I've got to come and get you wherever you are, and we need to have you at Aunt Catherine's house, so when he gets there, you can say, no, I don't want him to take the baby, and we can call the police, and they probably will not let the baby go. So that was our backup plan. Now, in the meantime, Anna is in a really bad place. She's in a really bad place, but she's following what's going on with her daughter and really worried about it and trying to help out. So I went to go pick her up. She was in town where I was, and she was dope sick, so she needed to get well, which meant that she needed money to go buy heroin so she could use it. And this was a really strange thing, because I was concerned. I was more than concerned. He was coming to get the baby. If we didn't have Anna there, appearing to be in good condition at the door, saying, baby doesn't go with him, I have just as much custody as he does, then he was going to be able to take the baby, and God only knows what was going to happen. But in the meantime, I've got dope sick, strung out, messed up Anna to be the upstanding citizen in all of this. So I went and picked her up. I actually pulled out $100 and gave it to her to go get clean. I never in my life thought that I would put my money towards her drug, or anyone's drug for that matter. It just was so bizarre. But in that moment, trying to make the right decision about what to do, it was the safety of my granddaughter. You do anything. And so that's what we did. So went and got Anna, went through the whole rigmarole of driving her to this crappy neighborhood, dropping her off at this crappy drug house, driving around the neighborhood for 45 minutes so she could get well, and then getting her into the car. So that took a couple of hours. In the meantime, we're all panicking that pseudo son-in-law is going to show up at any point an hour and a half away at my sister's house and get the baby. Trucked Anna out there. In the meantime, she didn't seem like she was getting to any more well. She was not in a good state. She'd had her heroin, but I don't know what else she was missing. She seemed really strung out, extremely agitated. She was very jumpy in the car. She did not look good. She looked sweaty. She looked like she was a mess. I did not think that it was going to go well when the police showed up trying to decide which parent should remain with Arabella. But Anna was clearly doing everything she could do in that moment, just like we all were. Thankfully, pseudo son-in-law never showed up. Thankfully, because I don't think that would have gone well for anybody. So he didn't show up that night, and Arabella, granddaughter, stayed with my sister. And shortly after that, within the next couple of days, my sister Catherine and brother-in-law Jerry got temporary custody or guardianship of Arabella through the court system, which was a huge blessing, but only the beginning of that particular saga. And this story will go on, and there's a lot more to it. And it's really interesting to me, I will just say right off the bat, how two families who love their kids very, very, very much, pseudo son-in-law's family and, my family with Anna, can come together and go through some really difficult times and even be adversaries at times, standing for their own children, and end up doing a really darn good job throughout all of it, being a family to that granddaughter, and actually getting along long term. So there's a lot of really tough, yucky stuff with this, but I got to hand it to pseudo son-in-law's family and to mine. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, the story will continue next Monday. This is just the beginning of when it starts getting really dramatic. And it does. So hold on to your shorts and have a great week until we see you on Thursday with our next solution video. Thank you so much for joining us.